And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here. On this Tuesday, February 4th, we have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining, between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We are going to talk about a star edge rusher for the Cleveland Browns, Myles Garrett, requesting a trade. We'll also get into, in the second part of the show, and this happened late last night as I was preparing what I was going to cover today, so I had to change some things up, and that's Cooper Kupp. So the Rams are going to trade Cooper Kupp. A little bit different. He didn't request a trade. The Rams are looking to move off of him, and they're going to work with him to try to find the best trade partner, because he still wants to play for a contender, so we'll get into that discussion as well. We'll also revisit Super Bowl 57, the Super Bowl from a couple years ago between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles, how that game unfolded and how things may look different this time around. And then I know we kind of gone through it briefly a couple times over the last couple of weeks now, but we'll just take a deep dive into the game. And then we'll talk about how important this game is for Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts for their legacy. And then in the final part of the show, I wanted to get into what Chris Canty had to say recently on Joe Burrow and why he is not an elite quarterback. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Myles Garrett of the Cleveland Browns. So he, unlike Cooper Kupp, he requested a trade. He wants to be traded. And we will see if the Browns grant his wish of being traded. But I'm not surprised by this. I don't think any of us are really surprised by this because the Browns they have been so inconsistent over the years. Well, in recent years, I would say. But overall, it's been a disappointing time since he's been there. And you thought last year, despite the issues at quarterback, the Browns still had a relatively good team. And, with Deshaun Watson coming back in 2024, they were hoping that they were going to have a big year. And it just didn't happen. They had the polar opposite. They had to start a couple different starting quarterbacks, Jameis Winston, DTR, and ultimately the Browns won a grand total of 3 games. And Myles Garrett, I think, has had enough. And he wants to go somewhere where the team is going to be consistent, where the team is always in play to make the postseason. And there are teams out there that need edge rushers. So I think that the Browns, at this point, you grant his wish and you trade him somewhere else because the Browns are not in a position to compete right now. They're not. Deshaun Watson, once again, tore his Achilles, and they're going to be picking in the top 3, and we'll see if they end up going with the quarterback. But right now, they're closer to rebuilding as opposed to competing. And like I said, you're coming off of a year, in 2023, where you made the playoffs and you started 5 different starting quarterbacks. But now it was a complete 180 and you won 3 games. So I think the Browns should sell off Myles Garrett. You get a ton of assets for him and you rebuild. Now, I don't know what Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are thinking. Only time will tell. If they end up moving off of Myles Garrett, then they're kind of embracing the rebuild. But you could get a ton back for Myles Garrett. And he has been unbelievable since he's entered the league. His first year in the NFL, he had 7 sacks, then 13.5 the following season, 10 in 2019, 12 in 2020, 16 back-to-back years in 2021 and 2022, and then 14 back-to-back years in 2023 and 2024. And pass rushers, it's rare that you have a pass rusher like Myles Garrett. And plenty of teams are going to be lining up to try to obtain him. Now, they're going to have to give up a lot to get him, like I said. But if you're a team that is in desperate need of a pass rusher, Myles Garrett would be a good fit for your team. And there are contenders out there. Supposedly, he wouldn't mind going to Philly, which I hope I don't see that. But, the Eagles are an organization where they will add to any, needs that they might have to address. And, if you bring in Myles Garrett, you only strengthen your pass rush. The Bills came to mind. I think the Bills are a team that needs an edge rusher. I don't know if they're going to be willing to do this. I know there were some comments made by Brandon Beane and how the team might not necessarily make a big move this offseason. But, if Myles Garrett's available, I think you got to give the Browns a call and try to get something done. I'm trying to think of who else would be in need of a pass rusher. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing Washington. Would Washington be a team? That would be a great pickup for them if they were able to get Myles Garrett. Like I said, there are definitely going to be teams that are going to come knocking and asking for his services. And it's up for the Browns to figure out, what's the best package for them if they are willing to trade him, which I think they should be. But it's just unfortunate for the Browns because they really thought, once they made the playoffs during the COVID season, you thought that was the beginning of the turnaround. They won a playoff game. They fell a little bit short to Kansas City, but you thought they were heading in the right direction. Baker Mayfield unfortunately got hurt. They moved off of him. They traded for Deshaun Watson, which definitely was a gamble, and it went the complete wrong way, the complete opposite way that they were hoping for, because he just cannot stay on the field. And when he has stayed on the field, he has not played well. So, yeah, it's just not looking good for them. Anthony Manzano in the chat, I'm reading reports that Miami might cut both Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb and trade Tyreek Hill. If they do that, would they have enough cap room to get Myles Garrett? I would have to look into that, but that definitely is a lot of players coming off the books. I still don't know about the Tyreek Hill trade. We'll have to wait and see on that. But I know Jalen Phillips has had a couple of injuries. Bradley Chubb's kind of been a disappointment. So that doesn't surprise me. Maybe. Tyreek Hill has a big contract too, so that is a lot of money coming off the books if they were to do that. And that would be another good spot for him too. Miami needs to bolster their defense too, so that wouldn't be a bad spot for him either. But back to the Browns though. Yeah, at this point, and you look at the division right now with the Ravens, and you figure the Bengals are going to be better. The Steelers, they made the playoffs, and they usually don't have a down year in the regular season. Mike Tomlin hasn't finished with a losing year. I think at this point, yeah, you gotta embrace the rebuild, and Myles Garrett could definitely put you in that direction if you move off of him. And I'm curious to see what they do with their number 2 overall pick. Do they take a quarterback, or do you go out and you take best player available? You draft an Abdul Carter, or maybe you bring in another veteran. Because you still have good players on this offense. Jerry Jeudy had a good year. David Njoku. Maybe you move those pieces too. I don't know if they're going to move Jerry Jeudy, but maybe they do. Anthony asked, are you a baseball fan? I am a baseball fan. If you could see in the background here, it's all Yankee stuff. So that tells you what team. Well, you can't really see, but that tells you, what fan I am of course. But, yeah, listen, I am all for the Browns, tearing it down and starting over. But at the same time, does ownership want Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to be part of that? But like I was saying the other day, Kevin Stefanski, I forget when I was saying this, but Kevin Stefanski, he won Coach of the Year in 2023. Now all of a sudden, they're going to be rebuilding, and what, are you going to move off of him? I don't know. But 2025 is it's not going to be a kind year to the Browns, and they could be losing him, and Nick Chubb's probably gone as well, another cornerstone to that franchise. But for a different, he's going to be moved for a different reason because of just the injury that he suffered in 2023, the horrific knee injury. It's just, it's unfortunate because Browns fans are just, they're hungry. They want to see this team be competitive, and when you saw the game in Baltimore, towards the end of the year here, the last regular season game, and, they got Bailey Zappi playing quarterback. It's just, it's sad. Because this team, the year before that, the vibes were high. I mean, you had Joe Flacco coming back and, playing well for them, and they made the playoffs. I know the Texans beat them up, but still, I mean, you made the playoffs. There was something to build off of. And there was no momentum going into this year. And Deshaun Watson, before he got hurt, just was not playing well. And at that point, I was like, well, you got to give up on him. And he's going to be a non-factor really in 2025 because, again, ruptured his Achilles again. So, Anthony also in the chat. I think what happens during the draft, I think Cleveland trades down to get more because I think they are one of the few teams that have a low amount of capital in 2025. I mean, they could. They could. I could definitely see that. I don't know what their way of thinking is when it comes to like the quarterback position. Are they going to take a quarterback, or are they going to go out and sign a veteran and try to compete? But I mean, if you go out and you trade Myles Garrett, that signals to everybody, well, they're rebuilding. I mean, trade him while his value is high. You can get a ton back for him. But let me know what you guys think, though, about this. Where do you think Myles Garrett could potentially end up? Let me know in the comments. So we're going to take our first break of the show now. And then when we come back, we'll talk about Cooper Kupp. He is going to be moved this offseason. He's definitely going to be moved. But he didn't request a trade. The Rams are looking to move him, so we'll talk about that when we come back. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.